Welcome to Citizen University TV. I'm Eric Liu. This season on our show, we're asking a simple but profound question. What is civics? To us, civics is the art of being a pro-social, problem-solving contributor in a self-governing community. And I want to unpack that. Pro-social meaning it's not just about seeking your most narrow selfish ends. Problem-solving in the sense that it's not just about complaining about things. And self-governing in the idea that no one's going to come in and save us and swoop in and fix things for us. We've got to solve things together. That's what it means to exercise our civic muscle. On other episodes of the show, we've looked at the work of community organizing or running for office. Well, today, we want to ask this question of what does it take to get local government to do what you want? How do you move that beast and move that machine? And it's worth thinking about in the first place that we live in a time right now where so much of our political discussion is oriented toward Washington, D.C., toward national politics. But it's in the local that issues like housing and transportation and education play out. This is where we actually do or don't make an impact that touches the texture of our everyday lives. And so today, to think about what it takes to get local government to do what you want, we want to focus on three particular strategies: testifying in hearings, meeting with representatives, and getting a lobbyist. And we're going to unpack each of these three for you and for us as citizens. So let's start with testifying in hearings. When you think about testifying in hearings, you think, you turn on the Seattle channel and you'll see things in the middle of a hearing, and sometimes, I admit, it can be painful to watch this. You can see somebody at the podium just going on and droning and not making any sense. And one of the things that we've got to remember is that it's just as painful for the person hearing that testimony. And so for us to think about how to do that effectively, we've got to remember three simple rules. If you're going to go to a city council hearing or to a state legislative hearing and you're going to talk about an issue that matters, you got to have a plan in the first place. You have to make it a story, and you have to practice. Now let's talk about each of these things. Having a plan. In the first place, what does it mean to have a plan and not just ramble? I think so much of the testimony that we hear, people walk up and they're full of passion, they're full of anger or hope or something about a particular issue, and they'll just start spilling forth. You've got to have a specific strategy of what it means to actually move people in that setting. And the way to do that oftentimes is actually to tell a story, not to load people with data and facts and conceptual notions, but to actually begin with a parable, something rooted in the life of the community that people can relate to sitting on the other side of the dais. And finally, practicing this, that if you just wing it up there, you're going to have trouble sometimes under the lights and under the pressure of that setting. But if you actually just take a moment to think about how you're going to do this and how you're going to look at people, that can make a tremendous difference. Let's take a look at a couple of examples of this to see how this plays out.
Because it isn't about the rate, it's about the structure. This is not just an Amazon tax, it is a tax on these family-owned grocers. Stores like husband and wife-owned West Seattle Thriftway, Metropolitan Markets, Wajimaya, your golden stars here in the community. That's because grocers are high gross sales, labor intensive, and the lowest profit of any industry, 1.5%. So you can see the tax structure has a disproportionate hit on the grocery industry. So I would ask you to slow down and look at what the impact is beyond Amazon and to your local family-owned businesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, what was pretty interesting about that piece of testimony was that this woman came to the dais, came to the podium with a real sense of a plan. She was not just going to rail in general against the head tax. This is what this debate was about, the recent proposals to create what some called an Amazon tax, what others called a general head tax. And she had a plan to frame this in terms of, she put it, local family grocers, which was itself a story, thinking about family businesses, thinking about these mom and pop businesses. You began to visualize what these places were and who these people were. She herself as an embodiment of that. She was not a slick professional politico type. She was just a regular person speaking in a homespun way. And she clearly had come up there having thought about this and done it once or twice. Now let's look at another example.
We continue to see the displacement of low-income communities, communities of color, and immigrants and refugees further and further away from their jobs, services, and community institutions that help them thrive. This dynamic threatens to undermine the economic growth of the region. It will undercut our greenhouse gas reduction goals, will make communities less resilient in the face of a disaster or tragedy. We have long believed that by capturing a public benefit from growth and reinvesting it in affordable housing through inclusionary housing programs like MHAR could slow the trends of displacement and suburbanation of poverty. By requiring developers to either build on-site or pay on a fund, we begin to capture the increased value of the land and make progress towards a more equitable city. I support the MHAR residential framework and the equitable implementation throughout the city because it's an important tool in a broader, comprehensive anti-displacement strategy. Thank you for your leadership in this.
Now, what I like about this piece of testimony is the way that this woman was able so much to capture complex ideas in a way that was very grounded, talking about housing affordability and the ways in which public benefit needed to be captured as new development is unfolding in our city. And the way that she had self-possession and was able both to read a document that she'd been preparing, obviously, she'd practiced, she'd had a plan, but also make eye contact with the members of the city council and look at them and humanize this issue. And she herself making that case in a way that was very, again, not abstract, but grounded in real experience. So you think about what it takes to actually have effective testimony. It's not rocket science, but it does take these ideas of having a plan and really thinking about how you're going to practice doing this work. Well, let's go to the second strategy here of getting local government to do what you want to do, and that's just meeting with your representatives. Now, again, you think about meeting with your representatives, and actually it's relatively rare that everyday citizens will spend time, face time, with their city council member. But it is not impossible. In fact, it is quite possible. Sometimes you can do that by actually requesting a meeting and going to the office and sitting down at the table with the council member or her or his staff member. Other times it might be just at a public event, at the opening of a park or something like that, where that council member is there, and you can go up there and you can say, hey, can I have a couple of minutes of your time? Can we talk about an issue, right? And here in the work of meeting with your representatives and how to make those meetings, whether they're short or long, planned or unplanned, making them effective, we actually can take a page literally from the book from our friend and former city council member Nick Licata, who wrote this book, Becoming a Citizen Activist. And in Nick's book, it's full of great lessons and insights from having been on the other side, being a member of the council and being inundated with different forms of citizen action and citizen pressure. But he talks about these three pieces of advice if you want to meet with a representative, an elected official of yours. Number one, be specific. Really have an idea of what is the problem you're wanting to solve. Not just homelessness in general, but this particular rise of homelessness in this part of town. Not just the need for more bicycles and bike lanes, but specifically how to connect the dots between these particular bike lanes and those. And to be specific in naming that problem. Secondly, to know concretely what you want from government, right? Not just, I want things fixed. Sometimes you want a piece of legislation. Sometimes you want a resolution stating the will of the council to apply pressure on the mayor. Sometimes you want a task force to be formed so that people can study an issue. Whatever it is that you and your fellow citizens want, you've got to know that and be concrete about that when you meet with that member of the council. And finally, don't accept nothing for an answer. And that may seem obvious, but it is the nature of politics and politicians to give you basically a nothing burger when you ask them for something and to say, you know, I'll take that into consideration. Thank you for expressing those views. That's really important. I really see how much this matters to you. And you will feel like you've been heard in the moment, but if you've got something you want to say, you've got to say, I can't let you off the hook that easy. Are you with me or not? Will you do this or not? Will you move this or not? Not accepting nothing for an answer is a really important part of the stories that Nick tells here. He talks about the ways in which if sometimes a politician, an elected member of your council, tries to give you a variation of nothing, in a closed-door meeting, then you've got to think about what it means actually to apply outside pressure, protest, or mobilizing voters, whatever it might be. And I think one of these, any one of these pieces, being specific, knowing what you want in terms of a solution, and not accepting nothing, each one of these is vital to being effective in making good use of that time. Nick talks about in his book a time when there was a proposal from a previous mayor to consolidate a whole bunch of commissions in our city government, women's commissions, sexual minorities, others, into a single body that would be more efficient and save money, but also reduce the voice of each of these communities. And so Nick thought about this, and he started hearing all kinds of pressure and complaints from people as he met with them. And what resulted from that was actually he decided to hold a public hearing to make those voices amplified. And when those voices were amplified, and this goes back to our first strategy of testifying in public, he was able to create enough general pressure so that proposal was abandoned. So think hard about how you want to spend time with that representative. Our third and final strategy here is this: get a lobbyist. Now, that may seem counterintuitive, right? You might think, well, to go to City Hall or to go to a Capitol, I got to be this person who's a high-powered, well-heeled lobbyist who works for a big corporation or for some powerful group. But the reality is that every one of us as citizens can have a lobbyist. And there are so many organizations out there that have been citizens' lobbies. We look today in our politics at groups like Sierra Club or Moms Demand Action or the Alliance for Gun Responsibility. But think about, over the decades, groups like Common Cause, which organized and originated as a citizens' lobby, or Public Citizen, which Ralph Nader in the 1960s and 70s founded, again, to be a people's lobby, to pressure and to create countervailing power against the lobbies that big corporations and big interests had. There is a long history of citizens' lobbyists. And another way to think about them is not the word lobby and lobbyist, which maybe feels tainted to a lot of us everyday folks, but rather than think about organized interests, that we create collective interests that have a voice, that have somebody who can work the inside game for us. That, in the end, is what a lobbyist is. Someone who can communicate, who has relationships in the building, who can actually move people in different ways and to think about how you actually affect things. Having that voice who can represent you in the halls of city government, but also have the relationships within government, both with our electeds and with key staff and appointed officials, is key to what it means to get a lobbyist. Well, all this work of getting local government to do what you want plays out in so many different issues today, right now, in our city. And we want to spend some time actually now looking at a particular issue and one of the ways in which one of our city council members has been hearing from citizens about getting local government to do what you want.